John will say a short dance. It's like a caution. Let us pray. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for bringing us together to remember someone we love very, very much. We ask your blessings on all of us to bring us home to our respective places safely and always under your care. Help us to cherish Bill, but also to cherish and love all those who are part of us today and going forward. Let us honor Bill and his memory by being a joyous presence and caring person to all those people. We make this prayer always through Christ our risen Lord.
Amen. Amen.
Good afternoon. I am Ed, Bill's younger brother. I want to welcome you on behalf of Bill and all our family that are here today. My family is grateful to all of you for your friendship and companionship to our brother. First, I want to welcome you to this meal and ask you to consider sharing stories about your friendship with Bill. I am going to start by telling my Bill stories. I will then ask my brother Arthur, who is the first child in our family and who is the head of the family, to share his thoughts about Bill. Then I will open it up to everyone to tell your Bill story. We would like to hear any Bill story, serious or humorous, that you are willing to share with everyone here as we remember his life. Bill was the 8th child in our family and I was the 9th. When we were kids, we always slept in the same room. Bill loved to talk, as you probably know, and most nights I fell asleep with him talking to me across the room. I have been thinking about him a lot over the last months and came to realize that he was instrumental in some of the most important decisions that I made in my life. You heard me say that he was a smart young man who wanted to use education to get ahead in life. He earned a full scholarship to Boston College High School. I was his younger brother and did not have his maturity or drive or smarts when I was in grammar school. I had never heard of BC High before Bill received his scholarship, but after he was admitted, I thought that if he went to BC High, maybe I could as well. Attending that school changed the direction of my whole life. Instead of getting a job right out of high school like my brothers and sisters, other than Bill, I went to college and then had a successful business career. Bill didn't realize that I would follow him to BC High, but his decision made me understand that I could attend that kind of school. Thank you, Bill. My second story about Bill's influence on me happened about 40 years ago here at St. John's Abbey Church. I had a business trip to the Twin Cities to visit a client and decided to stay for the weekend to see Bill. He was living on campus and had some kind of duties at one of the dorms. He arranged a room for me in the dorm. It was January and there was a huge amount of snow on the ground. It was bitter cold. I was prepared for neither the cold nor the snow. Late on Saturday afternoon, Bill asked me to go with him to the Abbey Church. It turned out to be the evening prayers, Vespers, as prayed by the monks. I had not been to church for about 20 years. I was not happy with Bill for making me walk through the snow and the cold. The monks did their thing. They read the prayers and sang, maybe Gregorian chanted, some of the prayers. I remembered from grammar school as a member of the choir that I used to sing those songs, prayers. Unexpectedly, I was deeply moved by that experience. I went back home the next day to Oklahoma. The experience of that Saturday liturgy lingered in my mind. I talked to my wife about it, and we decided to see if going to church was something that we should do. We joined, or rejoined, the Catholic Church. I thank Bill for opening up us to that grace. So Bill helped me begin life on a different path and started me on an unexpected spiritual path that I most likely would not have followed without his help and leadership. Thanks again, Bill. Now I introduce my brother Arthur to give his thoughts on Bill. After he speaks, I ask everyone to get some food. As we are eating, I invite everyone to tell your Bill story, what you remember best about him. Again, thank you for your friendship and companionship to our brother, Bill.
I got a very loud mouth. And
New
it
York,
carries.
New York.
I accompanied Bill on his 43rd visit to Ireland, his last. And what we did was, he made me an expert on cemeteries. That is all
Cemeteries.
I did. We went here, there, and everywhere. We hit Dublin at 5:50 in the morning, and I think the man's name was Frank that picked us up. And we went to a cemetery. And what it was the crypt where the 3 Irish patriots were, yeah, and it was an underground thing, and we couldn't get in. And all of a sudden, like a little leprechaun lady came out, and Frank, who was with he was the driver, asked him that, these 2 guys are from America, could they look and see? And she says, well, why not? She opened up the crypt, and I think the guys in there were Parnell, De Valera, and Collins. Yes, no, all right, whatever. Where
Good
am
story.
I? Huh?
Good story.
Is it the 3 paved? Yeah, that's, and we drove around Dublin just, kicking the can, showing me where Bill knew everything, and the guy knew everything. I knew nothing. Actually, I'm gonna tell the truth. I'm a C student. And that's all I ever
And
was.
cheated at that.
Yeah. But I'm comfortable with it. As of now, not before, because I never told people. I think people thought I was a D, but I'm not. I fooled all of them. The other time was in '84, my father and my mother were going on a tour with Bill, a 24-day in Italy. And I said, I picked up my daughter Patricia at Fitchburg State, and we stopped at my son's house. They had a little baby, new baby. And as I left to go home to Foxborough, you take the right. The car went left. Why it went left, I have no idea. So I said, well, we'll go down and see Myra and see what's doing. So we went down, and as I walked into the house and out in the kitchen, I walked in and I looked at my father and I said, let's go. We gotta go to the hospital. He is in the process of a stroke. Bill was sitting there, my father was sitting there, and my mother was sitting over here, and they were like, I'm saying, come on, let's go. We got in the car and went, and he had the stroke, thank God. And he lived, 9 years later, for 9 years. So now, the deal with Bill was that my mother and father were gonna go, and they were gonna have the students help them through 24 days of Italy. As a student. Now, if you know students, they ain't got no money, and all they were gonna do was walk and use public transportation, and it was crazy. So he's in the hospital. My father says, well, gee, why don't I have to go? And, you know, I'm not a traveler. And they came home and I, almost at the same time, I said, gee, maybe I should go and with Bill in case of my father. And that's how it ended up. And we had a trip that was made in heaven. You know what 24 days in Italy is? In 84? That was heaven. It was, the lira was, I don't know if it was up or down, but it was not in our favor, up with the American money. We had a beautiful time. Didn't get in any trouble. I shot pool in Florence, and we survived. And I was wondering if there's any of the students that we went with in '84, they're probably in their 60s, or maybe in their 70s. Yeah, that was Bill at its best. We,
Very good.
it was a tremendous. We had the, hey, yo,
That's
what
his
are you
dog.
doing?
We're trying to help with this, trying to.
Chemists like Bill and I used to have offices next to each other a lot. Kate Graham was here this morning.
Oh, I saw her.
And, you know,
There's a
and
word.
Bill was between offices. And grading lab notebooks is the bane of our existence, huh? Both Bill and I devised strategies, if you will, to pull us through, huh? Bill's strategy was to eat M&M peanuts.
Oh, yeah.
So you grade this many lab notebooks, it was a deal you made with yourself. You grade this many lab notebooks, then you could have a few M&M peanuts. So for his birthday, I gave him a cow that sat up on his haunches. The head would flip up, and on the inside was a couple of bags of M&M peanuts. And of course, when you open the hatch, so whenever Bill was grading lab notebooks, we would always be hearing every once in a while the moo, and we knew that Bill was reaching into the stash of M&Ms. Just it was a source of humor, light humor. Chemists doing their work. The second thing is, it's just a huge shout out from St. John's and St. Ben's to you as a family, because you got together to create the scholarship in honor of your parents. And that scholarship, and at least one of the outcomes of that is probably bigger than that by now. But one of the things it did was, it gave a scholar, like a 500 to 750, and it's probably $1,000 now, to the best St. Ben's student in chemistry in their junior year. And the reason that was important was because for years we had one for the best St. John's student. So can we smell asymmetry here? This drove Bill. He was determined to end that stuff, huh? And so you, as a family, helped end that inequity. And we are forever grateful to you for stepping in and doing that. Because and the legacy continues. And we are really, it was a very powerful thing. As part of at the end of the year, the scholarship day, we would have student presentations in the morning for all of our seniors, and then we would do all of and the families of our graduates would come, and they would watch their son or daughter give presentations, and then we would have a meal together, and then we would give the honors for first year, second year, junior, and senior year. So it was a big deal to have that kind of parity. Third thing, you mentioned how Bill changed the direction of your life, okay? I am 1989, a sabbatical. I don't know, should I go? I was thinking of MIT to do a year of research there, or Berkeley, okay? And I said, Bill, great cities, great schools. Where should I go? He just looked at me and said, Johnny, you want to go someplace where it's warm. But that's not dissing Boston, because I love Boston. He said, you want to go someplace where it's warm. So I went to Berkeley. Right decision.
Bill was attending an oblate meeting, and I think it was Bill's first oblate meeting. I looked over and I'm an artist, and my favorite medium is painting portraits. And I looked at Bill and thought, oh, he had such a beautiful, gentle face. And then we went around introducing ourselves, and Bill spoke his piece, and I thought, oh, he sounds very intelligent too. At any rate, both Bill and I were volunteers here at St. John's, and I had been driving for a number of years and got to the point where my eyes I could not drive anymore because the sun would affect my eyes. And I knew Bill came as a volunteer, so I went up and asked him if I might ride with him. And he said certainly that was fine, and that began our friendship of driving back and forth for volunteer day on every Tuesday. And I only remember Bill as being a kind and gentle, wonderful friend. And I don't know, we talked about everything and anything, and he just became very precious in my life. And I talked to Bill, I think it was the night before he died, and I said to him, I really wish that you would think about moving into a place like mine, where everything is taken care of for you. You really need to do that for yourself. And he said, well, I plan to do that, but not for a couple of years. So indeed, I was shocked and saddened, as we all were. Anyone who knew Bill, yeah. So,
Thank you. Owen Muldoon, he had traced Owen back to like 1704 or something like that. And so this was a picture of some of the people that were at this gathering.
Yeah,
And Bill, family was important, not just his immediate family, but all of these extended families. And my parents and Bill, my sister Sarah, and my wife, we took a trip to Ireland, and we met my mother's family, relatives there, both sides, mother and father, and my father's family's relatives.
Yeah.
And this was the first time that they had met them. And my mother died that year, later that year, so that was a very special trip. So genealogy was a very long-term thing to build, and family, as we members of his family, and I think he regarded the Oblates as family as well. I think you moved into that category, for better or for worse.
One of the things about Bill that was great was his capacity for loving people no matter who they were. Now, Bill was an opinionated person, we all know that. But at the same time, he was not a judgmental person about people he cared about. And we were totally different. I was born to a Jewish family. I'm a non-believer at this point in my life. He was a very spiritual person, a very religious person. And we would talk about it sometimes, but there was never any attempt on his part to try and change me, and I would never try and change him. Anyone who knows Bill knows you couldn't change. But, so someone was talking about food, and I was thinking, I mentioned to Ray in the car, Bill and I friendship, when it revolved around food, was very strange, because Bill was one of those people that ate to live, and I was one of those people that lived to eat. And we still would always find a way to find a place to go, and he could get his steak or his pasta, and I could get whatever I want. And he'd look at some of the things I'd order, and it was fine because we were friends. But the last thing I wanted to leave you with is what I think about Bill as a person. Now, when my father was in his last years, my parents lived a really long life. My dad died at 97, my mom died at 96, and it was all in recent years that this happened, and Bill helped me through all of it. But I found out from one of my relatives that my father, in one of his later years, turned to some of the other family members. He never said this to me, and he said to them, you know, Howie's the most moral person I know. And I don't have a religious belief, but I live my life by my morals. And yet, when I think about whenever I had a crisis of conscience or wondering what was the right thing to do, who would I turn to? Who would I ask, how would you do this? How would you deal with this situation? How would you deal with this person? And my moral compass was Bill.
Wow.
And I love him.
Very good.
One of the oblates here of this community, of St. John's community, and that was another way that Bill connected with this community, one of the many ways. But there are two oblate chapters in the Twin Cities. I coordinate one of them, but Bill would attend both of our oblate groups. So I've heard a lot about how Bill liked to talk, but I will remember a different Bill. I will remember the Bill who was very thoughtful in his comments. He was always very deep and spiritual, I thought, and these were, you know, topical conversations, so it made sense. At one of our oblate groups, we would ask people to help with refreshments or whatever. One time Bill brought the refreshments, and I'll always remember one of the things he brought, and I was introduced to Kerrygold Irish cheese. Yes. So I became a lover of Kerrygold after that, and I cannot pass the Kerrygold in the grocery case without thinking of Bill. I'll always remember him for that.
He loved our Irish brethren too.
And being a fussy eater. And as it turned out, I said, Bill, how can it possibly be that you're such a fussy eater? You came from such a large family. I can imagine all of you around the table. I don't know if Arthur had left home by then, but there had to be 9, 10, 11 of you, and I'm sure you had to grab everything you could grab. And I said, how could you become such a fussy eater? He said, well, it was easy, because whatever I didn't want, there was someone else that certainly I could pass it on to grab it, you know.
My brother John was one of the ones who benefited by that.
She never needed a garbage disposal while I lived in the house.
A couple of other things. You probably don't know that Bill and I attended movies Saturdays for almost a decade, it seems, religiously. And of course, he would drive down to his home on Summit, and I lived in Minneapolis. And believe it or not, I've never owned a car, and he would pick me up, and we'd go to a movie. So it always sort of rankled me a bit that we had the whole weekends to ourselves, and I thought, well, Bill, you must know it, was an extrovert, right? And I'm a bit of an introvert, and I always thought, well, Bill, why can't we go to the movie on a nice Saturday afternoon? There's not many people in the theater, and prices are a bit cheaper, right? But no, we always had to go to the theater because it was going to be jam-packed, filled with people, right? So that always struck me as Bill all over. One other short story that I told Howie and Martin in the car that I thought was quite funny. We belonged to a birthday club, and by the end of a couple of years ago, we were down to 3 members. Bill, I, and Al Weber. Al was here 2 days ago, but didn't make it today. In any event, it was Al's 80th birthday, and so we went to the fanciest restaurant, in the Lexington in St. Paul. And of course, we told Al, have anything you want, Al. And he had something, I think, very nice. And Bill and I each had a ravioli dish, a very nice piece of Italian cuisine. And Bill said, oh, and by the way, could I have an order of French fries? I said, Bill, we're going to have pasta. Why would you want French fries? But you don't want to say too much about it. So they brought the French fries. I can't tell you, I've never seen such a huge platter of French fries. I'm sure it cost $7 or $8, right? And but that was Bill, and that was French fries. He was a dear friend of mine since 1979. We talked on the phone until the very end, almost, I would say, every week to 10 days. So he will be missed for sure in my life. Thanks. And it was probably mid to late 80s. As a little kid, I was always sort of pestering my grandmother, trying to find out information about this, that, the other. I am a diehard, and I do mean diehard, Chicago Cubs baseball fan. In fact, the game just started.
Still nothing, Joe.
So I accompanied my mother to spring training in Mesa, Arizona for 11 years, from 1984 through 94.
You're going to go straight to heaven. Or hell.
In 1984, Mesa, that was my first year there, I found out that Mesa had a very large Mormon community and one of the largest Mormon churches in the country. And they also had a very big family history center. And that's where I began my research, which happened to be on my mother's side German, on my father's side Polish. And I started talking to Bill about this, and he thought, this was really cool and very interesting. And so often, I would say at least a couple of times a month, we would go to the Mormon Family History Center in suburban Minneapolis and do our research. And I believe that's where Bill started doing it. And as you know, he fell in love with it. And again, went to twice a year, would go to Ireland and took fastidious notes. And I know the family is happy to have those notes because that is another part of Bill's legacy that you and your family will have forever.
Very good.
Thank you.
And I'm a cousin of Bill's, and I'm representing the Hannon family out here for Bill's memorial. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in 1985, we went to Ireland and had we were in the south mostly, but we had a couple of days when my husband Charlie and I could go up to the north, and I think Bill had given us the name of someone.
Madge.
To look up.
Madge Majogan.
No, Mickey Bonner. And it was Mickey Bonner.
Bonner.
Yeah,
Mickey.
yeah. Forgive us, please.
And you remember the name, yeah?
Yeah, but we met Madge, and it was amazing to me. We drove up to her house completely unannounced. She opened the door, we said who we were, and that was the beginning of, come in,
Yeah.
served us a big tea and
Scones.
all the scones and everything, yes. We came back and told Bill about this, and Bill was on it like that. And he found other relatives, of course, including the Fury family, and brought them over in 1995.
No, 97.
97, excuse me. We met them and we have become fast friends. We go back and forth, and we've gotten to know their family, and Bill gave us that gift, really. It was his stick-to-itiveness in terms of the genealogy and he had, I think, a unique ability to walk up to anyone. I mean, anyone.
Yep.
And
Knock
just,
on the door.
Yeah.
Come right in.
Yeah.
Yep. Every time.
And I just have one more Ireland story. Two of my nieces and some of you have heard this, two of my nieces went to Ireland with Bill. Bill would often take people over, and show them around and so forth. And apparently at one point they were so close to the Cliffs of Moher, and Francie said, Bill, could we just go see the Cliffs of Moher? No. And they got in the car and went to some cemetery. Francie and Julie didn't know a soul, and why are we here, Bill? Anyway, that was Bill.
Yeah.
Don't believe anything he says.
No, I've never let the truth get in the way of a good story anyway. But Bill and I would have these conversations. He'd call me, he had his night to call people, and I always said, you have to be near a chair because it was not going to be a 5-minute conversation, So he's talking about Spanish peanuts. My dad used to bring them home, and he said, I was at the store, Tom, and I saw the Spanish peanuts. And there were 3 levels of them. Most expensive and the least expensive. Bill went for the least expensive. I said, Bill, never look down below me. Always go to the top shelf. And the other thing he loved was bacon. And we had
Another heart healthy food.
Yeah. And we were out visiting him. Was that when Gary had died? And we were out for a week visiting him, and we showed him to how you can microwave bacon. So you're not having this mess and everything else. And he loved it. Could never remember how long to cook the bacon. So anytime he was having bacon, he'd call me. How long do you cook the bacon? I said, Bill, you gotta write it down. 1 minute per slice of bacon. Make sure you have a napkin on the bottom and on top to absorb the grease. 1 minute per. He never remembered it. Never remembered it. I don't know if it was an excuse to call me, but it was just fascinating. So I told him, never look down, Bill. Top shelf all the time. And a friend of mine that knew Bill a little bit, and he knew of his frugality. He had he had to have a special order car. We didn't want electric windows. Had to be a stick shift. There was 3 of them made in America, and they had to ship it in from somewhere because nobody bought them anymore. But that's what he wanted, And he said, but he gave all that money to BC High, and what is he doing? I said, that's Bill. He was frugal to a point, but he's generous on the other side, So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. I guess all of us are a little bit somewhat of that same nature of frugality in areas and throwing the money out the window on the other, So that was my story. I thought it was cute.
I want to say something not for my family because I've already told them the story, but y'all, it's not funny, but I hadn't really been back to Boston. I was living in Vegas. My whole family's in Boston, and I hadn't really been back there since I was an adult. And I was making my first visit back as an adult, 2002, and we stopped in St. Paul, Minneapolis at the airport. We did a 2-hour layover, and I had 3 of my kids with me, and he had never met them. Maybe he had met the oldest when he was a baby. But he came to the airport, and we came out of security, and we spent an hour and a half with him. And then we went back through security, and we continued on to Boston, because he probably didn't know when he was going to be able to see us again. But that's how much family meant to him, that he was willing to come to the airport and hang out with us just so he could see us. So.
Very good story.
Okay, I met Bill in 1974, and being an American liberal, I used to think everybody's right to civil rights. But Bill over his life showed me, by being who he was, that everybody's right is human rights. And from that time on, I was always supporting the human rights instead of just being civil rights. And Bill taught me that by being who he was.
Tom, how did you meet Bill?
I spoke through another friend, and that's how I first met Bill. And we became very good friends from that time on. We became this brothers.
Was it somebody who was going to school at the university?
I think Bill lived in his house. This guy used to own a house, and Bill lived there.
Yeah.
And he introduced Bill to me. That was way back in '74, just after he finished his pharmacy school. He was going to graduate school at that time. So that's a long time ago.
I had one of the greatest adventures of my life because of Bill. He worked for Tom, and Tom was always, somebody had to go to the hospital. They didn't want to go because they couldn't leave their husband. I was the volunteer to take care of the husband, to get the groceries, whatever. So Bill kind of got this through osmosis, I think. But he came to me one day and he asked me if I would bring an envelope to Anne Scanlon in Ireland, because I was going to visit my daughter who was at Trinity. Oh. And so I take this envelope and I go to Ireland and I take the train. Now Anne lives in County Sligo. So I get on the train, I sit with this wonderful nun who is talking the whole way. I miss my stop. I am now one place past Ballymount.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I am in this town, know nothing about, I have 2 hours to wait. So I wander around the town and I meet this priest who says, oh, but have you seen the golden altar? So he takes me to this beautiful church where they had a gold altar that had been painted black during World War II so that the Germans wouldn't take it. And so I saw the golden altar. So I get on the train and I go back to Ballymote, sit with another nun, and I get off the train, nobody's there to meet me. They were supposed to meet me. Bill had arranged it. Nobody's there. So this nun says, oh, don't worry about it. She comes back with this little gentleman. She says, his daughter was supposed to be on the train, but she couldn't make the train. So you're going to be his daughter, he'll take you to Anne Scanlon. I am now getting into a car with this man who I have never seen in my life before and never saw again, but he takes me to Anne Scanlon's, who lives in a thatch, beautiful little thatch. And I walk in the gate and this dog comes running at me, and I sat down on the ground and I pet the dog. And I get to the door and I knock, and Anne Scanlon opens the door and she said, oh my dear, how did you get past the dog? It's everybody. The dog was fine with me. So I go in and she said, who are you? And I explained to her and she said, no, my dear, you're not coming until tomorrow. I've given her the wrong date. Nobody was at the train station. So Anne is covered in flour. She says, I'm just baking for you. And Mike comes out, and Mike gives me a glass of whiskey about this big. It was November, it was cold, and I'm sitting before the fireplace in the thatch, and a glass of whiskey in front of me, and Mike disappears. And I'm thinking, oh, this is bad. I'm here, they didn't expect me. What do I do now, you know?
Just keep drinking.
Yeah, really. So anyway, Anne intermittently comes in and talks to me because she's baking for me. And so finally Mike comes back, and into the house comes 25 people. Mike has gone to get everybody, the whole family, to come and meet me. And with them, they bring a feast, like we talked about, that, I mean, it was just beautiful, just gorgeous. And I spent a marvelous day with them. And then they took me to the train, and I got on the train and went back to Dublin.
That's very That's interesting.
Howard, you want to start?
Hi, everyone. I'm Howie, Bill's close friend for 40 years. And I guess what I want to say is how I met Bill. I met him through the Gay Softball League, and in 1980 had been in New York, and we were introduced to each other. 1981, the Twin Cities had a tournament on July 4th weekend, and my team came to play, and some of the guys decided to do a party for all the New York players, and it was in this big apartment. I don't remember the apartment or the people so much, but Bill and I sat down next to each other at the beginning of the party. And I won't say all the things we imbibed in, but what I will say is we started talking. And as all of you know, Bill can talk. But what Bill didn't realize was, so could I. And about 4 hours later, it was time for everyone to go home because there were more games the next day. And we were still engrossed in our conversation. We had missed the whole party, and the conversation didn't end for 40 years. And Bill was my dearest friend, and we got each other through the good times and the not so good times. And he was always there for me when I needed him. And so in the last year when he had his health problems, and he asked me if I could come out to stay with him and just help out, whatever, it wasn't even a choice. It was like, of course, I'm just honored that you would ask me, and worked it out with Ed and Sarah, so we didn't double tag team him. We each took turns and gave him the support he needed until he was able to live on his own again. And it was only because he was feeling good enough to come visit me in September that we actually discovered that he had left us. It was when he didn't respond, because Bill was one of the most, I mean, he was just, he cared about so many things, but being proper and being, showing the right ways of doing things. When Bill didn't respond to my phone calls or my emails, that's when I knew that something was up. And so to come here today and to be with the family and a few of Bill's closest friends, it really means a lot to me. But it was more that Bill meant so much to me. And I love him, and I still do, and I'm thankful for him being part of my life.